Begin transmission. Hello, everybody. It's Chris, aka Starrapter, here with Outer Rim Transmission 106. Tonight, we are talking all about Visions Volume 2, all 9 of the epic animated shorts from countries all over the world. How's it going, Ben?
Good. Just just always looking forward to talking Star Wars every week on Fridays.
Oh, heck yeah. I mean, this is our Friday nights, always here out on the channel. We are a little bit late. Things have been getting crazy with life, birthdays, communions, and everything else in between. So I'm trying to get back to a regular, strict schedule of 9 p.m. But hey, if you're watching live, sometimes we're a little bit late. So eventually we'll get there. Just even debating, okay, maybe we should just pre-record. But no, we're doing this thing live, darn it. You can chat in the comment section there. And, well, you can always leave us an email at outerrimtransmission@gmail.com, or you could always just leave us a comment on our Twitter socials, wherever we are found at any time. Of course, we are in the 21st century here, of course. All right, so Milton would like to be with us, but he is currently busy, so we are just going to talk about Visions. He'll give us his full thoughts. He gave us his initial impressions last week, so you can go back to last week's episode and listen to that. But for now, we're going to kind of just go through in chronological order and crank these things out because, I mean, I would hate to be on a time schedule, but we only have so much time, and we want to talk about all of them tonight. So we are going to devote as much as we can to each one of these. And I will say, starting off with the first one, this one started off with a bang for me. When it comes to El Giri Studios, Sith, I love this one. I mean, this is a way you start off. Like, we had the duel from Visions Volume 1 that was very much like, this is a showcase. This is going to be something that stands out. And immediately, the painting aesthetic came to mind. I was like, wow, this is very bold. What'd you think about the art style, Ben?
Oh yeah, the art style was definitely it didn't throw me off in a bad way, but it threw me off in a like, whoa, that's interesting, like an interesting like creative choice, that's for sure. So like that was my like big initial reaction as soon as we got into the episode. And like you said, it was a good start to like kick off this new season of Visions, to like, really get things going, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, so this one was developed by a studio in Spain, El Giri Studios, and I'll be honest, I don't have a lot of experience with any of these studios that we're going to be talking about tonight whatsoever. But something that stood out to me is it has sort of like a animatrix kind of feel. I think Milton was mentioning it last week, where it's like that early 2000s kind of like lo-fi grade CGI, where it was like not exactly detailed and it was more or less like a flat kind of CGI look. But as the longer we got into it, the more I really enjoyed it, especially as we got outside of the building. We started seeing the Sith Lord and the droids and the more of the action flowing through. I really started to just get drawn into it.
Oh yeah, once like we got into the episode, just seeing like the flow, like the action, I thought it was really good. Like you were saying, like, to me, I think unlike any of the other episodes of this entire season, like this was one of the most like visually interesting ones just because of that whole art style. And like you said, for me and maybe a lot of our other listeners, I don't have much experience, if any at all, with any of these studios for this entire season. So it's a nice surprise, like seeing like their style and like their spin on Star Wars and how they even do anime, considering like, like I said, we don't have experience with these studios. Chris, you're muted.
We're kind of late again. So yeah, thanks for joining us, Dark and Rigonzo. A little late, but now than never, right? So things I liked about this one specifically is getting a chance to see a different side of the Force and seeing how the Force could be depicted in the creator's eyes as art, as artwork, and seeing the power of the Force through that lens. What I really like about the High Republic is that we are getting to understand that everybody views the Force differently. Some people view it as wind. Some people view it as the tide, like Elzar Manu, the tide, the waves coming in, flowing, greater in strength and a little bit more lighter and things like that. Like, so I almost depicted like this is how she sees the Force is through the paintings. And I thought that was very creative.
Oh yeah, it's definitely cool, and like you said, it did kind of give me like, I'm not like the most informed High Republic person. I can definitely say that, but based on what I know about it, it definitely made me think of the High Republic and was like, oh, I could envision this story, like taking place in the High Republic era, like because of her using like the Force through art and versus its normal just like traditional roles, say the Jedi or Sith would use it in.
I love the addition of the droid. I think the droid was a really neat droid that kind of reminded me of BB-8, where you have this spherical rolling droid that turns into like a kind of like a crab or kind of like a spider. It's very interesting.
Oh yeah, like, well, that droid was interesting, and like you said, it's cool just seeing. To me, like with Star Wars as a whole, whether it be like this show, the movies, the shows, whatever, games. I think one of the highlights of Star Wars in general, I mean, heck, going clear back to 1977, are the droids. Like, like that's always like an interesting factor for Star Wars fans because it kind of like sparks that imagination of like, ooh, that's a cool droid, or ooh, that's a cool like thing. It's like futuristic. It's just I feel like that's always been one of the biggest charms. Like for me anyways with Star Wars, I think the big charms for me are like, of course you have like the whole mystique of the Force. It's like the Force, then the aliens, and then the droids. Like those are my like three like probably most intriguing Star Wars things that have always captivated me. So anytime like I see a new iteration of a droid, it's always just really cool like checking it out.
Yeah, you're right. That's one of the identities of Star Wars. You have the battle between an Empire and a Sith, or the Empire and the Republic. You got the Jedi and the Sith. You got the Force, and you got droids. Like, and you got space battles. It's something that you gotta have all the time. But yeah, overall, I loved the idea at the end of this, how she's kind of a gray Jedi. I know that's a loaded term out there in the fandom. People are like, oh, if you're the great Jedi's don't exist or anything. Say what you will, but the fact that somebody's skirting between the light and the dark, the idea that this character was a Sith originally, and then the Sith came back for her, and they're like, yeah, we need you now, and whatever, and she's like, got that saber, and the way it just ignited and had two different kind of colors. We never seen that before in Star Wars, so that in its own right was really neat. But just the entire philosophy behind having an allegiance to both sides, having the balance of the Force in all respects right there on show.
Oh yeah, I thought that was a really cool aspect. I wasn't expecting that either. So that was like a nice surprise. And like you said, it really symbolized like the balance in the Force, the balance inside of her when it comes to, her use of the Force. So it was a cool like spin on it, I guess I would say, to to really like captivate this episode.
Yeah, so do you have any other things you would like to add about this first episode here?
Not really. I think to me the highlight, of course, like the story was cool, the droid's cool, lightsaber, etc. That was all cool. But I think for me the highlight of the episode for sure is just like the style of it, like the artistic style of it. I thought was done really well, and like I said, it was unlike many of these other episodes we've seen in this season or even in the last season. So like for me, that was like the biggest standout of this episode.
Oh yeah, for sure. Next up, we have Screecher's Reach by Cartoon Saloon. This has come to us from the creators over there in Ireland. This is pretty much like Milton explained last week. It's very much a ghost story, but it has a lot of culture, a lot of history, because it does bring back the Industrial Revolution aspects of that. The kids in a workhouse, they're just driven to the bone, and they have to have escape, and they have escapism and adventure. And what'd you think about the animation? I think that's the way we'll open up with every one of these, because obviously that's like the big thing on point here. Is the reason why. Part of the reason is all the animation is not different. It's not just anime. This is CG. This is almost like stop motion at certain points. Like, so what was your take on this 2D type of animation?
Yeah, for me, I thought this animation was done really well. It really reminded me of, I don't know. It just reminded me, like, I could see that. Like, that is like the perfect example of like an anime style that you would see sometimes, like on some of those Cartoon Network anime shows, like at
Yeah.
1 o'clock in the morning. Like to me, I could have just slotted in this episode at like 1:30 in the morning on Cartoon Network, and it would have been just fine because like it just has that and it just has that vibe. Like I don't know why it got my attention because of that. Like it instantly made me think of like back when I was younger watching those anime shows at 12:30 at night on Cartoon Network on the
Yeah.
weekend or whatever. Like that's like the vibe it gave me. Like it
Oh.
really made me think of those type of shows from back in the day.
Yeah, I've never been a Cartoon Network guy. That's
Yep.
why I didn't watch Clone Wars right away. But I've always was a Nickelodeon, Nick at Night kind of guy. So can't empathize with you there on that one. But what I
Yep.
will say is this story was pretty gripping at the end. And Milton was talking about this, how he thought this was out of the ones he had seen, the one that deserves like the most of a follow up to a certain degree. And I could see that, just the idea that this girl was so dead set on getting out of her lifestyle that she would forfeit her friends to just try to make a better life for herself, even though if she was maybe making a deal with the devil. Because I mean, I would assume that that character is sort of like a Sith character, but even that entire journey was like, whoa, what is this like Sith witch thing? This wow. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, spoilers. I think this was my favorite episode of the entire
Oh,
season this season. Um, but yeah, I loved this episode. Like for me, it was like perfect. The animation style, the story, like you said, the kids going from working to industrial revolution vibes to wanting adventure because like adventure is always a classic Star Wars trope. Like the heroes wanting to go on an adventure, they did that, and then they had to face a conflict of dealing with this Sith character, you know, like I just thought it was done in such a good way. Like, and then of course, like the lead having to make the decision, like you said, it's kind of like the deal with the devil because that literally was like a Sith character, and in my estimation, that was a Sith character that did not come off as a Jedi. So like it definitely is like a more probably bad side leaning character. So it was a really good episode to me. And like initially when they were like in like that cave area, like it had really like it had kind of like scary vibes to it, like I thought it was just done really well. Now just imagine when I was watching that, my thing with that was I was like, man, I would have loved to seen that in live action, like that entire short in live action, because that would have been really cool. Because it would have been so creepy and just like I don't know. I feel like that would have been a perfectly translated live action episode, if they would have done that.
this is that dark Sithy stuff that's going on with what we see in Rise of Skywalker, like the stuff with the Emperor's clone and all that. For me, it was good, but I admit there's ones I like even more in this batch of 9 episodes. The next one, I gotta say, I really enjoyed this next one here, brought to us by Punk Robot. This is In the Stars from the Chile animation studio. And for me, this was really neat because this is classic people versus the Empire. And the idea of these two sisters, they are like the last of their kind. The Empire's come in and they've taken a valuable resource. They've taken water, the very thing we live off. They've taken water from these people. So to see the animation was probably the most cutting edge, I would say, or maybe not the best word, like the most unique because it's like almost like kind of gave me like Clone Wars vibes, but kind of gave me claymation vibes at the same time. But then you're looking into frames per second of the characters themselves look like they're going slow motion sometimes, and then the overall world is like that dystopian kind of like I don't know, punk kind of Blade Runner-esque, like dystopian cyberpunk sort of looking thing. So I thought it was like from a design standpoint, from the animation, the movements, just the combat, the violence. I was like, dude, this is awesome. What were your thoughts on this one?
Oh yeah, well, like you said, for starters, the visuals of it really reminded me, like you said, it was kind of like Blade Runner dystopian, almost like even I think the movie is called Equilibrium with Christian Bale. That it's kind of like those type of like dystopian vibes. Um, but uh, but yeah, I got those kind of vibes from it for starters. And then, like you said, the action, it's just classic like Empire, and you got the good guys. And I just thought, yeah, I thought this was one of the better ones. I have this listed like because I went when I was going through the episodes, I was rating them just out of 5 after each one, and I have this one listed as a 4 out of 5. I thought it
Oh,
was, I thought it was very good. Um, and yeah, I just thought it was done really well, and it captures your attention, like the style captures your attention, and like you said, it has that almost Clone Wars esque feel to it, which is always an attractive aesthetic, I think, for especially for Star Wars fans. Like, who knows, maybe about like some random person watching it, but like for Star Wars fans, I think that aesthetic really works for us. Like, you could have a whole series in that aesthetic, and people like it.
oh yeah. I mean, look at Bad Batch is a spawn of Clone Wars, and we see how popular that show is. So
Yeah.
that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Going over some other things I specifically like is the emotional overtones, family, and the Force Awakening in somebody. Like that was cool. Like when the characters falling off the edge, falling off the cliff, and it's just reaching out with the Force. Like that was one of those moments like you see in the Force Awakens with Rey just calling to Luke's saber away from Kylo, and he's going, "Huh?" So
Yep.
classic cliffhanger, like cheer at the screen moments of somebody becoming a hero in that moment.
Yeah, that was one of my that was probably, of course, I mean, that's one of the highlights of the episode, but or the highlight, but like I would say like that was probably my favorite because like you said, it's that Force Awakens vibe, that the classic like the Force, the hero getting the Force, like that whole trope fits in Star Wars. So like it's just cool getting to see that done in a unique way in this episode. Like I really liked how they did that because you could generically introduce the Force. There's a million ways you could generically introduce the Force, but it's cool that they did it in that fashion, I would say.
One short that didn't have any Force that I could see is I Am Your Mother. And this is the one out of the UK from Art Studios. This is all about another big aspect that George Lucas loved to insert in his movies, including Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and that is racing. So this one is all about the races. We have Wedge Antilles, and I believe they said New Hannah City, which would actually be on either Chandrilla or on Hazian Prime. I think they're on Chandrilla, though, which is actually Mon Mothma's home planet. Not that this is all storyline, but it's cool to see it anyway. But I like this storyline. I'm telling you, going too far ahead, I like this season more than I liked season 1. Because I feel like more of these stories hit for me consistently than they did in season volume 1 of Visions. From a storytelling perspective. I'm not really talking about art. But from a storytelling perspective, again, another big thing in Star Wars is the familial relationship. And they went above and beyond because they had a mother-daughter. We don't really get that in Star Wars ever, right? It's always father and son all the time, right? Well, actually, no, it was father and daughter in Rogue One. So they flipped the switch on us on that one. I could find other examples in some of the TV series, but in the main movies, that's basically it. So I appreciated that the studio did that. These are the people that did Wallace and Gromit, so it does look like that kind of... What would you classify that as, that kind of animation, Ben?
I'm not sure. Like, it was definitely a unique animation style, that's for sure. Yeah, I don't know what that would be classified as specifically. Like, I'm not the best at like naming the exact animation styles, but yeah, I mean, it was just unique, I would say, but
Ah,
but yeah, like you said, with the whole basis of the episode though, like for one, I mean, heck, George Lucas has said it plenty of times, like Star Wars, there's so many fathers and sons, like even fathers and sons, like the tropes, like not even from characters that are like bloodline related, like, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon,
yep.
father and son, Obi-Wan and Anakin,
Oh yeah, yeah.
that sort of thing is all through Star Wars. So it was cool getting, like you said, the mother-daughter thing. I mean, heck, the only real mother daughter thing we got was Padme and Leia for like 5 seconds, and then
Ha.
we got. I mean, and the only other mother was Shmi with Anakin. So like,
Oh yeah.
so it was cool getting that aspect. Um, and then like you said, the whole like racing. It's always interesting to see whenever they incorporate racing into Star Wars, just because like you said, it like goes back to the old George Lucas like stuff. So like, there's inspiration, I'm sure, from there. And yeah, like for me, I think this was a solid episode. It definitely wasn't
Okay.
my like favorite ones, but I think it was solid. I think it was entertaining. Like I think the good thing is with most of these episodes, they're like at a baseline entertaining, I would say. Like my comparison to both of these seasons, I like this was my like overarching view of season 1 and season 2. I think season 2 is more representative of Star Wars Clone Wars, where it's like
Hmm.
Clone Wars has like a solid, you can turn on any episode of Clone Wars and every episode will at least be like a B or higher. Like it's solid throughout. Like, and I think that's what this season is. Like it's solid throughout. It has some good moments. It has some not great, but it's still just solid overall. And I would say like Vision season 1 though is more like Star Wars Rebels, where you have a lot of high moments, like where you have like, the Night of the Apprentice or whatever it is. Like, you have all these high moments, but you do have some really low moments like Lando and his
Hmm.
puffer pigs. And I think that's what Vision season 1 is. Vision season 1 is more Rebels-esque, where you have really high moments, but also some like wacky stuff that's like, I don't know about that. So like that's how I kind of view like this episode though is more like just the Clone Wars, just the B level episode. I think it's solid. I think it's fine. Yeah, I would say that.
Yeah, what I liked about this one as well is because we get everything about teenage angst in this one. It's like the daughter just doesn't think that the mother, she also doesn't want anything to do with the mother because she's like kind of annoyed by her. And then you see like the rich people looking down, and there's like her friend. It's like, oh my gosh, like all this angst in even this one moment, which I didn't get right away. But the creators had to put underwear in space because there's this whole quote from Leia or from Carrie Fisher with George Lucas, like something about a brawl or something about underwear or something like that, and what she was wearing in A New Hope. He's like, well, yeah, that underwear doesn't exist in Star Wars. So literally, they had bras and like panties falling from their junk ship as it landed. I thought that was a nice little touch.
That's funny. That's a little addition right there. I noticed that as well too. And like you said, it's funny. It goes back to that whole Lucas quote about there's no underwear in space.
Yeah, we have Dark Nerdy Gonzo saying there's a Star Weaver poster hanging in a Twilight ship. Max Rebo doll, Porg, and Bantha figures. What's Star Weaver?
I Dark Nerdy Gonzo might have to tell us that because I am honestly not sure. I'm not familiar with that term at all.
All right,
I don't
well,
know.
he'll get us the answer in a few moments, I'm sure. Moving on into the next one here. We have Journey to the Dark Head by Mir Studios. This is the Korean studio. And this is the one that I will say it was my least favorite. I equate this one to the twins from Volume 1 for me. I was just like, okay, power levels, kind of insane. It just seems like such an abstract story that lacks detail for me that I just didn't know what was happening. And I just felt discombobulated. I didn't like this story. It's like, okay, we're cutting off the head of this statue, and this guy is in this guy's dreams and he's suddenly there, then they're severing this bridge, and then they're happily ever after. And I mean, yeah, sure, some of the combat looked cool. Lightsabers, the way they are lit and animated, were certainly awesome, but I don't know, something about the story just seemed like there wasn't enough there, and it just kind of seemed okay. And I mean, there's certain aspects, like I liked seeing the Jedi Council at this time, whenever this was, but I'm trying to get to the heart of it, to like get to the story that links to Lucasfilm and Star Wars, and it just seemed like, without a better word, like a generic like good versus evil story that didn't really have any depth to it for me.
Yeah, like for me, I really enjoyed the episode. On my like little scorecard, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. Just because like I thought it was, see, but you know, like me and Milton, we like a lot of this like over the top like anime style, like this sort of stuff. Like I really, just from a pure entertainment perspective, I really enjoyed it. Like entertainment wise, I think it's like a 4.5, 5 out of 5 entertainment visually, like just the action, etc. But then like the story, like you said, I admit, like I got to the end of the episode and I was like, I honestly don't know what I just watched. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like I really did. Like I really enjoyed the episode, like the action and stuff and just the way they did things. But then I got to the end of it, like you said, you got like the statues with the heads and like all this stuff, and I'm just like, I really don't know what it was. I don't know what it was intended to be about. Like
Yeah.
what was the title again, Chris?
Journey to the Dark Head.
See, because I don't even know what that would even, maybe, I don't know. I can't even like really extrapolate like the story,
Yeah.
just because it was, like you said, it was just kind of all over the board, and it was just like it was a lot of visual noise. Like to me, that was like watching Transformers. Like it's just a lot of visual noise.
Oh, I understand a connection. I got a connection to the Star Wars saga, and the connection is prophecy. We see this come up time and time again in the prequels. The Chosen One, Qui-Gon
Oh
is
yeah.
convinced, and I like the fact that they had like the rain was creating this image of something that'll happen eventually. We don't know how it's gonna happen, but this said thing is going to happen in the future. And this character, this pilot character, was able to find out that it was her. So
That makes sense. Yeah, and prophecy's always like around for Star Wars, so like, that makes sense.
I had a feeling that's what this is. We got our answer. What Star Reaver is, the band from Tatooine Rhapsody from Volume 1 of Star
Oh,
Wars Visions.
that's really cool. Okay,
That's a cool
actually,
deep cut.
that's a really really cool deep cut. We'll have to tell Milton about that one. I did not
I'm
know
gonna have
that.
to watch that again. I've only watched most of these one time. One that I've
Yeah.
watched multiple times, spoiler alert, I'm gonna really like this one, is The Spy Dancer. This one was awesome. This is, oh, I did not get the name of the studio. This is the only one I didn't jot down. Do you know the name of the studio? They're the French studio. I'll look it up as we're talking.
Yeah, I know it's the French studio.
But yes, go ahead. Give us your thoughts on this one while I look that up.
So for me, I thought this one was very very good as well. Just because it was one of my favorite. Just because, like you said, we have like the Empire. We have like I just thought it was done in such a cool fashion. Just because like the story for one was intriguing. The visuals, the animation style was really good. It was on point. It wasn't like jarring or anything. It wasn't anything too creative, like say the first episode. It was just on point animation. The characters, like you have the Imperial character, you have the lead girl, and it's cool to see. Like I think for me, anyways, when it comes to like this episode, it's really cool to see like how tight of storytelling they can tell in just like whatever it was, like 16 minutes, I think. Like, so I thought that was one of the best aspects of this episode. And the fact that like like the lead, the girl, like they get busted by the Empire. Like, I don't know, it was a nice like Star Wars story, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I'm still looking up the name, but as I continue to look for it, this one was a number of things. It was, again, the mother mother son, mother child relationship in Star Wars. It was that Empire versus Rebel relationship, and it was that big oh crap twist moment sort of thing that we had in Empire Strikes Back. Let's see, is it called Dart Studios? No, wait. No, Studio La Cachette. Studio La Cachette is the studio name for this one. Yeah, so I love the idea that we got this idea again, just like the Irish one, getting a glimpse into what it was like in World War II. I believe they said this during the panel you could watch on StarWars.com for Celebration. They had the Visions Volume 2 panel, and all the creators for all 9 shorts were there, which is really cool. And I think they were saying like this is what happened in the war. Like you would have French spies that were like occupied by the Germans or something, and then they would go and they would like infiltrate and get information by like serving them and stuff like that. I thought that was a really unique take on Star Wars, because when you think about it, it's like, yeah, the stormtroopers were there's literally things called stormtroopers in World War II. Like this is what George Lucas was pulling from. So to kind of get to that heart of it with like calling back to the history is a really awesome way to kind of enhance and enrich Star Wars, if you ask me.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, for me, I'm not like the biggest fan of Andor. This is an episode of the show of the Visions. I could see like this is a storyline I could see like popping up in an Andor type show though. Like I could easily see
Yep.
like the Empire characters, like the lead guy from like Deidre and her people. Like I could see him and her, like these guys being out somewhere, because they're real people too. Like don't get me wrong, they're the bad guys, but they have to go out to restaurants, or they have to go out to bars or wherever to eat and chill too. So I could easily see like these, like the Andor characters. Like I could see this playing out in Andor. Like this is when I watched this episode. Like the episode was great and everything. Like it was really entertaining. It was like you said, it brought back so many of those different vibes and tropes from Star Wars. But like when I got done watching it, I knew that you would like this one. I literally joked to my cousin, because we had watched it. We were watching these episodes together, and I joked to him and was like, I bet Chris is gonna really like this episode because it reminds me of something that would be in Andor.
Yeah, like for instance, like the first sequence of Andor, when he goes to that brothel, for lack of a better term, and he talks to that woman. It's like, yeah, she's basically information. Like I could see somebody like that being a rebel spy or imperial spy, vice versa. But yeah, just the idea of the elegance of it, and even the artwork. I mean, there's Elsa Chiartier, I think is her name. She's a famous comic book writer or comic book artist, and she has comics that look just like this artwork. I mean, I guess it's like kind of the French, like national kind of sort of artwork that they generally do, where it's like the very thick ink lines, like the stormtroopers, like blotted ink. Like it has its own like old-timey style. Like it looks like the style from like the 40s or the 50s or something that's like preserved in time, like a very old type of animation. And even the beautiful nature of the spy dancer as she was dropping from the reaches of the ceiling there, and like the flowiness of the robe, and the way she's fighting with it, just like grabbing stormtroopers and throwing them down, the way that the guy had a dark saber. Like there was a lot of really cool moments I loved in this.
Oh yeah. I thought that was a great moment, and it's great, like the fact that these studios aren't shy about like using like things like stormtroopers and even the dark saber at that. So yeah, I thought that was a really cool aspect to the episode.
Yeah, and this got pretty dark, the Empire taking newborn kids away from mothers. Like that's really effing dark. And spoiler alert, I hope by now, if you've listened or you watched, like you have watched these episodes, because that's all we're talking about on this episode. It's just a big reveal at the end that it's her son. And even though like her son is working for this evil regime. Like, she still has hope. It's her son, and she stirs like a little bit in him. And if we were to have a second episode, I think we're gonna see that guy's redemption, and just no matter how old somebody becomes, how set in their ways, it's the mother, it's the father that can ultimately like sway somebody, or vice versa. It's the kids, as we see in Return of the Jedi. Luke is ultimately able to save his father because it's the bloodline. It's deep down you have feelings for that person, and they'll pull you out of whatever rut you're in. So I love that kind of sense of salvation and redemption, even though we don't entirely see it, but I could assume it's gonna happen. It should happen.
Oh yeah. And you know, that's like always one of the running themes of Star Wars as a franchise is, you know, redemption is always like the biggest theme. I mean, look, from the sequels with Kylo Ren to Vader in the original trilogy, like, you know, you have that running theme. So it's cool seeing that like carried over into this episode.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So it's one of my favorites, so far. And getting into the next one, another great one from 88 Pictures, The Bandits of Golak from India. This is the closest animation we have seen to Clone Wars. I want to know more about 88 Pictures because these guys look like they've worked on Star Wars before or something, because it looks just like it could be an offshoot of the Clone Wars, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I thought this episode along with the one we talked about earlier, I thought was really Clone Wars vibe, but this was for sure the most Clone Wars feel of any episode, because like you said, maybe they worked on, maybe not Clone Wars, but maybe, you know, something else related in the past, like another animated project, or maybe they got inspiration from Clone Wars, you know, for that animation style, or, you know, anything really. So like it was definitely cool getting to see that style, you know, continuing along in the Star Wars franchise.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. What did you think about the overall story?
I thought overall, this was another one of those solid episodes. Like for me, it didn't hit as much as like say the second one or the fifth one, I believe. It didn't hit as much as those, but I thought overall this was just like a good, solid story. It's an episode. I feel like it was one of those episodes you could easily just throw on in the background, you know.
I mean, all right.